The cool thing is my elbow was supported during that clap. I didn't use any shoulder muscle.
No, let's not stop that again.
Look at this.
All right. You ready? You guys ready for this?
Yes.
That's so handy. So army.
You guys weren't impressed at all with that either.
It'll make you weak.
I'm too down to business today.
You are about big. If I was talking about a schedule, you'd be like, "Oh, really? Okay, where do you put the dates? Oh, no." You're all into schedule.
If this was a Seinfeld episode, the next time you see Lee competing in the golf or the frisbee golf, he won't be able to throw his throws all off, and it's because of that. It's because of that elbow rest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I win, it's because
of
like
that. Atrophy his shoulder. That was like the key to him winning.
Except you would have given it to him as a gift, Jake.
That's right.
Right?
So wait, I'm Jerry. He's George.
Yeah.
You're Kramer.
Not George.
Kramer.
Why do I get to? I'm not George.
Because you're the most high strung.
That's right.
It's true, actually. God, I'm George. I do have loose forearm muscles because of this.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry. And all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all illustrated for all the major publications in the business. And we've together published somewhere around 75 books. And we've all taught illustration in university art school programs.
That is right. Each week we come at you guys with different listener questions or interviews, depending on the week. Each time you're going to learn something after we fight and we agree. Brand spanking new.
That's right.
You know what's funny is a lot of times the fights happen off, not unrecorded, the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So
what have
maybe
we fought
should
about?
Just leave the cameras and the audio rolling all the time.
You two, here's what we've fought about. These two and their bets.
Oh, don't even bring that up. Because I win bets and then Will Terry tries to weasel out of them.
No. The weasel clause.
Shoot.
Oh my gosh, you started it up.
Anyways, what I wanted to first item of business today is we're launching the 3 Point Perspective Patreon. So what I want you to do is, this is a great way to support the show. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you've gotten any sort of help from us, anything that's like helped you in your career or helped you in your pursuance of art and mastering your craft. A great way to support that is to become a patron. We have a few things that we're doing for patrons. So if you want to have early access to the show, you're going to get these shows when we record, or not long after we record them, after they're edited, right? You're going to get access to a 3 Point Perspective Discord chat room channel where you can be a member of like the 3 Point Perspective community, and we talk about episodes and give input on episodes and ask questions and stuff like that. The questions, we're going to have special Q&A question shows just for patrons. So if you really have like an important question that you guaranteed want to get answered, chances are you'll have a better shot at that with becoming a patron and asking it for our patron-only Q&A shows. And those shows are going to be live streamed as well for our patrons. And we're also recording exclusive episodes just for patrons. So we're still going to drop episodes here for free for everybody, but we're also going to record a special episode each month just for patrons. And then lastly, and this is like kind of the cool thing, I think, is when we're done recording here, we're going to record a pro tip. So every month, the three of us are going to record something that we're working on currently or have worked on in the past and show kind of how we did it and break down the process and just some like pro art tips to help you in your art career. So those are the kind of things offering on the 3 Point Perspective podcast Patreon, and we really want to see you over there. And without Do you guys have anything you want to add to that before we move on to today's topics?
Only to make fun of the way you said one part of that. Which is
Patreon.
like, no, all the pro tips will be recorded from, only the stuff that we're working on currently right now, unless it's from the past.
That's right. That's right. Just to be clear, it's whatever we've worked on, current or past or present, maybe even future. Who knows? We'll figure that out too.
It's going to be cool. There's going to be lots of little
travel.
tips and tricks in there for sure.
Yeah, we're just excited to like kind of become a big boy podcast, and for years we've been actually running this podcast out of our pockets. Like every time we pay the editor, we just like we don't take advertisements. We don't take, people don't pay to be interviewed on the show. Like we're just doing this sort of as a service. And yeah, we, try to drive people to SVSLearn, but for the most part, this podcast has just been like a service for the community. And in order for us to like make it more of a, just to make it more of a community and to offer more to it, we're opening up the Patreon so we can kind of do more with the people who, join us here on the podcast and want to be a bigger part of it. So that is that. I have a follow-up. August of 2021, we did an episode about art scams and how not to get scammed and what to watch out for. And I got an email a couple days ago from a guy named Kevin, who's an illustrator, a working illustrator, and his subject line was "Sucker Punched: Avoiding Artist Scams." Right, and so he had listened to our art scam episode, but this scam and knowing what he knew, and if you haven't heard that one, you got to go into it and listen to that section on art scams because you have to protect yourself and you have to be vigilant. But he wanted to tell us about how he got scammed out of $3,000, and it was a modified version of one of these scams. So I'm going to read his email. He says, I discovered your podcast after started freelancing full-time from home this past spring. Listened to almost every podcast while working, even the scamming episode. But he says, I just got scammed out of $3,000 by someone posing as a project manager. Hired for one project expanded to 2 projects, all money sent by check up front. The second project was canceled. The money was refunded, and then the check turned out to be bogus. So my question is, would you give tips on what artists should look out for to avoid scams and how to check that a new client is legitimate? Okay, so just to be clear, this is how the scam works. Someone posing as an art director or project manager hires you for a project. They give you an assignment. You turn in sketches, you turn in drawings, you finish that. And then they say, this is great. We want to hire you for a second one. And they're like, sounds good. And so then they send you a check for both projects. So now you're sitting there with $6,000 or whatever. And then I don't know what the check would be for both projects, but you're sitting there with a pile of money. And then they say, that second project got canceled. We need you to send that money back. And now you're sending back money that they didn't send you because the initial check was bogus, right? So they're trying to time it so that before that money's been deposited in your account, you're sending them your own personal money on good faith that you're going to be getting that money from them. So the weird thing here is kind of the weird thing you got to watch out for is really doing your homework on who you're doing the work for, right? So how would you guys go about doing that? And have you ever gotten anything like this?
I've gotten asked to do the whole sending money thing. I'll send you an overage or something. Just know this: the biggest tip on this one being a scam is that in this industry, clients always slow pay you. I mean, almost always they're you're waiting to get money from them after work's been completed. No one ever sends you money ahead of time or more money or for another. And if they did, if someone ever did this to me, one thing that I would do is say, I'll hold on to the extra 3,000 and hire me again in the future for another project.
So you're going to treat it as a credit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because money never goes the other way, ever. And if someone's asking you to send money back, that is the weirdest janky stuff I have ever heard of.
Right.
It would definitely raise some red flags. I guess my question, I'd like to find this out from a bank. Maybe I'll call like Bank of America or whatever. But if they're running this scam, and so they've given you the upfront check, right? You deposit it. What's that window before they find out the check wasn't real? And I mean, would that be a way to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and wait for the funds to clear, so I'll send you this back in 3 weeks or, whatever.
Yeah, you can do that. But this is me hating on banks, but way longer than it should. That check should be discovered the moment it walks in there. And that's a real pet peeve that I have. And you get charged. If it turns out to be bogus,
Right.
the bank will charge you for even trying to put it through.
Yeah.
Not to mention the overdraft stuff that with all your other stuff that will bounce too, if depending on how much money you had in there and you're spending funds that aren't actually available.
Yeah.
I also do just a cursory, every time I get contacted by somebody I've never heard of before, I just do a quick LinkedIn check. And I go in there and I just want to know who I'm, it's either a Google check or a LinkedIn check. And usually Google will take me to LinkedIn because I haven't met an art director or a project manager who isn't active or has like a current profile on LinkedIn. And, if they're willing to, now we're telling the scammers how to like get through, get through, if they're willing to go through and make a fake LinkedIn profile too, you just have to have a good like BS sniffer. So you look at their projects and you see what they've worked on. And then really what helps is if you know somebody who's worked with them or you ask them who else they've worked with.
True.
And then, I mean, you don't want to, like, this is what you do if something's fishy. Because if it's a legitimate person, you don't want to be like, well, who have you worked with? I need to go vet you first, right? But it does help to do just a little bit of that kind of homework first too. But I like Will's thing is like definitely money doesn't go the other way. It only goes towards you, and you just say, hey, let's have this be a credit for the next project. You like working with me? You just said it. I'm going to be here, and hopefully your budget can handle it.
Just a quick Google search on how many days it takes. 2 to 5 is what it says, depending on the amount and who it's from.
Yeah, they're
what bank
always in a hurry. They're like, they always have a reason. I need that money back real quick. Sorry to inconvenience you. I'll let you keep some extra if you'll just get it to me real quick. Their whole scam relies on timing. But I would say to Kevin, like, please don't feel beat up by us. One of the things I would say is, I started illustrating before the internet was ever a big thing. It's just embarrassing to admit how old I am. But these scams are new in the last 10 or 15 years or so, and 20 years, and so we all kind of got started before stuff like this was even happening. And I can imagine that if you're starting out now, it's so exciting to get attention from someone who wants to hire you that I would imagine it would be really easy to turn off some of your radar from the enthusiasm that it generates from just getting.
Yeah. Look at what the pattern has gone through on internet, and internet sort of scams have gone from, you remember a while back, it was the super weird, I'm a prince in another country and I need help. Like it was just this crazy story that sounded so fake, all the way up to now targeting you specifically for what you actually do for a living. They've really honed it in. So that's what's scary to me.
And I got a $6,000 check. It's funny how this one's 6,000 as well. That's like the magic number for scammers or something.
Yeah.
But I got one sent to me, and the guy, his story was, I saw your art online. I want to buy a bunch of your art pieces. And I'm moving to this country, and
Red flag.
yeah. And I want to surprise my wife. I need to make it happen really quick because her birthday's, in a few days. Is there any way you can put this together? And I had never heard of it before, and I was all in. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I'm going to get, $6,000, and then, or I think it was like 4,000 or something, 3,000. And then all of a sudden this check for 6,000 shows up, and he's like, yeah, I don't have a bank yet. So if you could send me, I think it was $2,000 or $3,000 back so I can get started. And I hate to use you as a bank, but kind of implied I am buying your artwork. So it's win-win.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when you're like, no.
Well, yeah, because he was wanting money back, and I was like, which pieces did you want? And he was like, whatever you want to send me, kind of a thing. And that was a red flag, because I'm like, if someone's buying something, I'm like, well, what did you see that you really liked? Just pick some, just like how many, for this amount of money. Like, it was just, he didn't do enough work.
He's like, listen, I got 50 artists on the phone right now. I can't deal with your questions.
Yeah.
So, but if he would have said, "Oh, I loved the one with the little animal gathering berries in the forest," then you'd be like, "Okay, which one?"
Well, the other problem was the check looked really suspicious. So when I got the check, I was like, "This doesn't look like a check. It's on like really light paper."
Was it on notebook paper? Did it have lines on it?
I mean, it was a printed check, but it was a print. And what's sad is I had saved it. I'd love to flash it on the camera right now. I saved it for a long time because it was funny, but I don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
But
And if it was me, I'd be like, which piece? And they're like, it's the one with the robot in it. And I'm like, which one?
That's all.
Yeah.
But you like my cat paintings? Which
Right.
one?
I'm working with a guy right now that called me out of the blue, and he wanted to work on an indie project. And he told me over the phone that he had done a bunch of stuff, and he gave me his website. I went there and looked, and I was more impressed from his website than the way that he had even talked himself up. He had worked with a couple people that I knew. They have a game company, board games, and it was just legit all the way through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just got the
And
natural.
also, you could look at the email too and see, like, is it at a Gmail address? Then you're like, wait a minute. If it's at the company's address, that's a sign that it's a little bit more legitimate.
I mean, I guess ultimately you have to pay attention to your gut feeling and the red flags. Like the second that, like Will said, if they're sending money up front, okay, that's way different than the rest of the industry. My red flags would have been flying all over the place with that. So I would have started doing the research, needing some references and all that stuff. But I sure wouldn't have sent him the money back. Just because that's a major scam, is overpaying for whatever, where people buy a car or any service.
Yeah.
I guarantee Kevin will never be scammed like this ever again.
Never.
At least it was. I lost $3,000 just in cash. I just dropped it. So at least his was like
Oh yeah, that's
a
right.
thing. Yeah.
At least like someone tricked you. You just tricked yourself.
Yeah, I just dropped it out. I had it in a. This is what you get for wearing a fanny pack with $3,000 in cash in it.
At an art show, right?
Yeah,
It's funny
Art
because
fair.
one time I was at an art show and I found a fanny pack with $3,000 in it.
I remember that. Will, you took everybody out to lunch.
So
That
you don't remember
awesome.
that dinner that I bought you?
You know what the biggest sinking feeling was? It came out of it. The fanny pack was still on me, but somebody came over and like tapped me on the shoulder, be like, "You dropped this," and they handed me like a $5 bill. And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you!" And then I go to put it back in the fanny pack, and it's all gone. So I left the zipper open, and so it just blew into the wind. Somebody had a great weekend on me.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right,
easy
next
come, easy
question.
go.
This comes from Marla. She says, help, I'm a disorganized disaster. Question is, how do you keep track of everything? I'm struggling to stay organized, whether it's expenses, deadlines, or whether or not I'm still expecting payments from clients. I would love to hear your tips, tricks, and best advice for getting organized and staying on top of everything. So how do you guys do that? Like, how do you do the administrative side of this job?
So she's asking not specifically how do you get stuff done. She's saying specifically within the admin side of it. So say you got a time block. So she's figured out her daytime schedule. She's not asking about how to schedule it. She's asking
like how do you keep track
Stay on
of
top.
all your clients, when deadlines are, when what expenses, like all of a sudden shoot, you're out of printer ink and you
Right.
it's 2 days away from getting it and you need it to print stuff. Like, how do you prepare for all that? And what do you guys
I use
do?
I've switched over to the program called ClickUp. I'm not paid by ClickUp. It's just something that I use. And I just use the free version of it. I'm sure there's a pro version of it, but it's a really nicely designed site. It's easy to prioritize admin kind of things. And so I just have an admin category there and I just throw general stuff at it. And how I attack that stuff is through scheduling. I do want to throw this out there because it's been one of the greatest tips of all time for me. I've always been good at time blocking things, but I get too specific. Like I say, okay, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to do the sketches for this page in the book I'm working on. And I realized that was where my problem was. So I backed up, got the 10,000 foot view of my whole life and said, okay, how do I want to spend my day? And so my normal days now is like, okay, from 9 to 1 is going to be only creative work. I don't get specific on what that creative work is at this stage. It's just like, that is when I'm working on artwork and that's how long I'll work on artwork. And then from, 2 to 5 or whatever, I figure out that's admin work. And I don't pick out what admin work, but I know I'm going to be doing admin stuff there. And just having that big high level, here's sort of how my days are organized around creative work, exercise, and admin work. Those are sort of the three things I got going on in my day. It's been such a huge change to know that these hours will be spent creative. These hours are spent doing this kind of stuff she's talking about. And then I go into ClickUp and I have the individual items, if that makes sense. So it's just been
Like
it's
your
been a good
to-do
way
list.
Right. So I don't have to schedule everything all day. I just know
Right.
that I've got this 3-hour window block of admin and then I've got all this list of stuff and you can go in there and prioritize or whatever, but it's drag and drop and you can kind of move stuff around based on your priorities or whatever.
What do you do, Will?
I don't do as many freelance jobs as I used to because I'm working on bigger projects and with fewer clients and so. But I can tell you, I really liked an analog system. Back in the day, I would use a book that I made myself a form, and in that book I would have a line for every job, and I would give them a job number. I'd have the name of the client, their phone number, their email, the due dates, all the important information all the way across, and then I'd have a calendar that I could reach right from my desk. And I would put all of my due dates on there. There were times where I was doing as many as 20 different freelance projects in a month,
Holy
start
cow.
to finish.
Yeah, how do you keep
when I was
track of
doing
that?
editorial, and I had to be organized and being able to look on the calendar and go, okay, so this week I have 4 due. 4, I'm already working on a bunch, but I've got to physically mail out 4 of them. And my goal was always to try to be done with the project. Like let's say it's due on a Thursday. I want to be done with that one on Tuesday. I want to be totally finished so that I can. Now, of course, this was back when I was mailing stuff. So I guess when I think about it, going back to when I was working digitally, I still did the same thing, emailing. I wanted to email the actual artwork the day before so that I was early, but not too early. But being able to see those due dates on the calendar. Now, I don't break it down as much as you do. You break down like parts of jobs, right? But I kind of had it in my
Yeah.
head on like how long it would take for this one, how long it would take for that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of just did all that kind of math in my head.
Yeah. I think for me too, I'm like an analog type of guy, although it really helps to, to have a digital calendar that you can refer to at all times via your phone. But I'll tell you, I'm really good at like professionally staying organized, but in my personal life, it's not, it's not as organized. So this last Friday, I had scheduled myself at the same time to do a service project with my wife. We were going to paint the faculty lounge at the local elementary school, help paint it for the teachers, a birthday party for my friend, and a D&D game with my son at someone else's house. And I said yes to all of them all at the same time on Friday night. And like Thursday, I realized what I had done. And I was like, shoot. So I had to like call people and be like, no, I can't make it. And I was just frustrated with myself because I'm like, this doesn't happen with like jobs. I'm really on top of it. And I was just like, to my wife, I was just like, why? I feel like I just want to relax when I'm off work, but I'm realizing I have to like still be a big boy and do keep track of things outside of work. And she's like, here's what you do. Pull out your phone. Anytime anybody asks you something to do something and you say yes, you just punch it in on your calendar. Then the next time someone asks you, you say, let me check my calendar. And then you know if you can do it or not.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Simple
so
truth.
I appreciate her for that. But for career stuff, I have a physical planner, and anytime anything gets on my calendar or comes up, I immediately put it in the dates, when to start it, when sketches are due, when finals are due or colors are due, all that. I put it in the calendar so that I can see that's what's going on. I put it in a to-do list so I can look at a to-do list just on its own, regardless of dates, and see what order those things are in. So it's like, bill client would be on the to-do list, but then on my calendar, it would also have a date connected to it. And then I'm also the same as Lee. So that's the very narrow specific, but I also have general cadence to the week, to where Mondays and Tuesdays are Jake Parker illustration work days. Wednesdays and Thursdays are SVS days. Fridays are kind of administrative catch-up days and promotional days, like work on the marketing side of my job, right? Mm-hmm. And then catch up on anything I didn't finish on the first 2 days. And then those days themselves, mornings are more creative time. Afternoons are when I can take calls or handle some administrative stuff. That's when I'm feeling less creative and can focus, shift my focus into more left brain kind of activity. Mm-hmm. I also recommend listening to the Cal Newport podcast. It's called Deep Questions. It's about how to do deep work, how to have the deep life. And he talks a lot about organizational stuff. So I would check that out too, because I subscribe to a lot of what he says. All right. Is that question answered?
I would say, let me just add this on a little tidbit too.
Yeah.
For me, writing it down was, I'd have that book by my desk, and collecting, this person, was it Marla mentioned, collecting money as well, payments from clients. That's one of the worst things for illustrators to have to do is, you're owed money. Your client should just send it. It's starting to feel like it's getting a little bit late. One of the things I had to learn was it's much better to go ahead and fire off a call or an email as a reminder, like, hey, just wanted to remind you. If you've already sent the check, that's great. Just wanting to send a little reminder. It's better to do it a little early because sometimes clients will pay the squeaky wheel before they'll pay someone else. So someone else might just be sitting there waiting. And if you go ahead and say, send a little reminder, they'll pay you first because they know that you're looking.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
important
and those
to-
emails, they don't have to be anything other than, hey, just checking in on that payment. Hope you guys are doing good.
And I would even a lot of times say, I know that you're not the person who's going to cut the check, but if you could, just remind that person. That way you're not.
I always ask for that person's email, and I also always blame my computer calendar. I say, hey, I got a little notification popped up. Checking on the invoice. Do you have the person who's responsible for that? It's nice. It takes a little bit. If you don't have an agent, if you have an agent, then you can blame everything on them or let them handle that whole side of it, which is an awesome thing.
Right.
But yeah, I would go through my book and I would mark paid, and that way I could look through and see the ones that hadn't paid, and easily go back and get those. I made the mistake one time of trying to collect from someone who already sent me a check because I had forgotten to mark pay on there, and I felt like a real idiot when they were like, yeah, we've got the did you not get the check? Actually it says you cashed it, and oops. So yeah, keeping detailed records so important.
Right. I recently did that too. I'm like, hey, I never saw this money hit my account, and they're like, really? We totally sent it to PayPal, and I forgot that I had sent a PayPal invoice for this one instead of a bank account invoice. Yeah. And I went and checked PayPal, and sure enough, they had paid me.
I keep questioning all my clients about every job I've ever done, hoping for them to pay me twice. They never do.
What I like doing is I will send I'll send them like a $6,000 check, and then really quick I'll be like, oh my gosh, I overpaid you. Can you just reverse that back to me?
Oh my gosh. Hey, can I give everybody a tip? Because Will and Jake didn't respond appropriately to this. I'm going to give you guys a working tip. So I've been having shoulder problems. If anybody has shoulder problems, if you work as an artist, you keep your hand lifted all day long, right? With a stylus or a paintbrush or even with the mouse, you keep your so that means your arm is using a lot of muscle, or not a lot of muscle, but it's just strained the whole day. So I've been having shoulder problems. I got this little thing from Amazon. I'll set up a link. It's a little support for your elbow, and it's kind of articulated. It moves around, and it stops you from holding your arm up the entire day. I showed Will and Jake earlier, and they didn't care about it. So I just thought
this is for the 5% of people that are watching us on YouTube. You can actually see his stupid little device.
I'll put a link on it. If you're having shoulder problems, you will. If you're holding your arm up all day, you will eventually have neck or shoulder problems.
It's going to weaken you, Lee.
You cannot avoid it. Nothing can weaken me.
Your frisbee frolf game is going to go downhill from that.
This helps all things. No, seriously. If
I
you're
told you,
problems,
Lee, I had one of those. I used it. It was great. But
what happened to it?
I didn't need it anymore because my shoulder got so strong. No, I didn't need it anymore because my desk situation changed to where I wasn't holding my arm up all the time. It just rests on either my table or on my chair thing.
If you just want to make sure your arm is supported, otherwise you will start to develop shoulder, neck, or even elbow problems, because anytime you keep something slightly stressed the whole day, it's just too much strain for your body. Your body's not made to do that. So you need to, like Jake, either have like arms on your chair. So it's just a public service announcement I like to get. It sucks to be injured.
Where'd you get that? Sky Mall or Hamaka Schlemmer?
I got that at Lee White physicaltherapyproducts.com. I wish I got a kickback from this stuff. I just Googled it because I was having these shoulder problems. I was like, oh my God. So then you start researching ergonomics and the ergonomics way of working. I'm like, oh my gosh. I actually went to see a sports therapist, and they were like, yeah, you're probably stressing your arm the whole day, aren't you? I'm like, well, yeah, I sort of keep it lifted the whole day as I'm drawing and moving. I mean, I rest my hand on the Cintiq when appropriate, but it just, leaning a little forward and whatever. Anyway, he's like, you just cannot hold your hand up the whole day. You got to figure out something. And so then I Googled it, and this is what came up on Amazon. I'll put a link.
Pretty soon, Lee's going to have one behind his neck, and he's going to have one for the other arm.
Oh, no. That's I will tell you guys a little.
Yeah, and he's just going to have like motors that control his arms
Kinda like,
to draw.
Kind of like they use in movies where somebody's falling. Have you seen the people that are in that rig? And it's like a circle rig, and they're just completely able to film them.
This is where it
falling
starts, Jake.
I will say this. We were in a meeting the other day, and Will is just totally now lying down in meetings. He's just like on the couch, not even looking like he's trying.
What goes around comes around, right?
He's on his phone.
I was having an off day.
His phone's like held over his face.
Here's
Over
the
his
truth. The truth that the audience needs to know is my air conditioner went out, and I didn't have a good chair to sit in, and I was in the recliner. And when you're in a recliner, why not recline, right?
I mean,
So
He
assuming
reclined.
it's not just
And
an
now that
clever
the air
name.
conditioner's fixed, where am I? In my office chair. That's right.
with no arm support.
That's right.
All right. Do we want to move to this latter half of the episode where we tackle Mark and
Yes.
Scott's problem? So
Let's do this.
we got these two emails separately from two guys who are in middle age. They're entering middle age. They're late 30s, early 40s. And this happens a lot, not just with artists, but I think with anyone, where you sort of have this, you've been like post graduation from high school, you're 20 years into your life now. And your first 10 years, your 20s are like figuring out how the world actually works, in the real world, not my parents take care of me and I go to school, but like I'm on my own. And then your 30s is sort of your putting everything you've learned into practice. And then your 40s is like this evaluation period. Like, did I go down the path I was supposed to go down? Like, is this what I'm really supposed to be doing? And you realize at 40 that you've got another 25 years left of work, working life, essentially, if you're going to work to your 60s. And that's when you're like, do I want to be doing this thing I've been doing for the last 20 years for the next 20 years? Or if I'm going to make a change, it's now or never, right? And so that's where these midlife crises start to happen. And subject from Mark is titled 42 and at a stalling point. And the subject line from Scott is, who am I? Okay, so really quick, he says, I just turned 42 this month. This is Mark, and I've been struggling to find clarity and direction in my career. When it boils down to it, I just want to make a living with my artwork. About 3 to 4 years ago, I started creating illustration portfolio pieces that I would use to send out physical mailers and electronic mailers to 500 potential clients in publishing and editorial. And he was doing this every 3 months. I haven't had any jobs thus far with that strategy, and I'm doubting my abilities and approach to getting work. And then he says this, I struggle to see where my work belongs. I'm not sure if I should continue pursuing the publishing editorial side of things. I don't see myself as a book illustrator doing children's books, although book covers for more mature audiences seems more my lane. And if you look at his work, you could see his art style there. He says, I feel as though I need to focus more acutely on something, but I don't know what it should be. I wonder if there are other paths to pursue beyond the traditional editorial publishing markets that I was taught about in the early 2000s. And I get a sense or a common theme in each of your podcasts that it's important to do the work that you enjoy. So here's a guy not quite sure where his art fits. Second question, Scott says, I've been doing art since high school, and after 20 years, I've found myself questioning what kind of artist I am. I was always attracted to comic books. I even drew a few, but I never felt comfortable with the narrative format and felt more at home being a single illustration kind of guy. Being a cover artist was always a goal, but it's very hard to get to. It is a hard field to break into. 2 years ago, I transitioned over to painting with watercolors, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I've been in a couple of galleries and have sold my artworks that I submitted to, but is that who I am? I could draw digitally. I could draw by hand. I could paint. I have very little trouble putting my hand at any kind of art, even writing and music. The question is this okay? I have heard that you should choose a path or a specific style that you enjoy and want to attain, but I have trouble being the mechanic when I'm happy being the handyman of art. So I guess the overall question here, because I assume these guys aren't alone, is where do you fit? how do you find that niche that you can inhabit and thrive in? And is there one piece of advice for all these guys, or do we need to like kind of give these guys individual piece of advice? If you look at their artwork, they're not bad. I mean,
I think you
these
need
guys
to go individual. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
There's a commonality here, though. Maybe I'll
Let's
address
argue.
that.
No,
Well,
sure. There's
individually-
crossover. There's
You
crossover.
want me to
individually,
share, you want to share screen?
You could share it if you want to, if you already have
Okay.
the privilege there. I will say this. They're asking sort of two questions. I mean, if you're happy making the art that you're making, which is definitely on that second one with Scott, he's asking sort of, is it okay? And it's totally okay if you don't want to make a living at it or you don't want to sell it. I mean, you can make portraits using marbles only, or, whatever, any style, any technique you want. If you're happy making it, do not think that that's not okay. It's totally okay. The challenge comes when you say, I want to make this stuff and I want to make a living at it. Well, now somebody else has to buy the work, and those are two different things. So if you're happy making the work and you don't need to make a living at it, by all means, just continue what you're doing. Be happy with this stuff. That's the biggest thing. Don't change to get more people to like it or more people to buy it or whatever, if that's not your goal. But assuming that both these people are saying, hey, I'd like to be a pro, and where do I fit? The one common thing, these are two very different kind of artists, but I will say the reason they're not receiving work is because they're both drawing individual things for the most part, individual items, center of the image, nothing actually happening. So the question I always ask people is, why would I hire you? What would I hire you to do? And there's no answer here. Like, where do these people's work live? Not really many places. I mean,
Well, and I think if it's like if Mark he's doing a lot of caricatures. If that's what you want to do and compete with the guys and the gals that are already out there doing caricatures, you have to ask yourself, why would they hire me instead of the people that are already doing it? What am I bringing to the table that's different and that's better? And when I look at Mark's caricatures, they are not pushed as far as some of the top pros out there, and the drawing and the rendering and the color are not as advanced, and it's a really hard thing to break into, because there's so many people that are really, really good already doing it. Now, having said that there are always lower paying clients that can't afford to hire those top guys that are looking for the next level, and even the next level under that, and probably even the next level under that. But even in those levels, there's really good people already competing. And so I think if Mark really wants to do the caricatures, because that seems like what his portfolio is mostly filled with, then get 8 of the best people out there doing it, and some of their best caricatures, and make a 9 grid and put yours in the middle, and start to really look and see, what are they doing that I'm not doing, and how can I do mine better? And then I'll just say this second thing is, like, you kind of hit it, Lee, as far as, and I'm still staying on Mark's portfolio right now because I want to give specific advice, but that is, you're not saying much with most of your pieces. So and I would describe your style in some ways as over rendered, in that it's highly rendered without saying anywhere near as much as the amount of time you put into it. So like the piece with Elon Musk, it's a really highly rendered portrait of Elon Musk with a rocket going up in the background. But are you reporting on the fact that he had a launch? Everyone knows that he launched a rocket. Why is your illustration special? Why do we need to see your illustration of Elon and that rocket going up in the air? Because right now,
there's no stance. It's kind of just
you're not saying
generic.
anything that we don't already know. So you've got to interrupt people's days by saying something that they haven't heard before if you want to get attention. editorially
Right.
speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, that means taking a stand on where you think the piece should go. Is this a good character or is it a bad character? And there's two totally different ways you could portray them, depending on if you think he's a pro or a con. But it has to lean a certain direction.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, here's a portrait of somebody and they're a football player, so they're playing football. It's just super boring.
That's why most, and I pick on that one because there is a political factor to it, but most political illustrators choose a side and
Right.
they play to one side or the other. And so, yeah, in that
Right.
sense.
I look at this too, and I feel like it wouldn't hurt to like continue your art education a little bit too by taking some mentored classes with professional caricaturists or portraitists or the kind of people who are doing the work that you want to be getting, because they're gonna like clue you in on some of like the secrets of working in that industry, and B, they're going to kind of help your work get to that level, the standard that's expected for that. And so it's just, how do you go about finding that? You look at who all these top artists are in that industry and just check and see if they've ever taught a course. If there's something that you can purchase from a Gumroad, website, or if they're affiliated with some, it's going to take a little homework. And then if they haven't, then you kind of go the second route, which is find online schools or courses that are have a breadth of classes, and then you can look for something that will that sort of matches what you're already looking for. And then the other thing is reach out if you have a budget, an education budget. Reach out to some of these artists and just say, "Hey, can I pay you for some art lessons?" Just some feedback on my work. At the very least, a portfolio review, and they'll help you. Now, to the specific question of where your art fits, it doesn't really fit anywhere right now because you're not creating the kind of art that, like Will was saying, that people want to hire you for, that people need. You're not filling some sort of art niche, right? So if you look at, I'd say with the skills that you have, it would be more of an editorial type of thing or more of a book cover type of thing, like your instincts are telling you, but you're not showing pieces that are going to fit that bill, right? So now it's like going back to the portfolio drawing board again and creating very specific pieces that are going to fill that an art director can look at and say, "Oh yeah, I feel confident hiring this person to do a book cover for me." And that might be you're making fake book covers and putting them up there to show an example of here's how I do it. That might be you're doing, you're picking 5 articles from New York Times editorial or The Atlantic or Washington Post or something like that, and you're doing your own editorial illustration for them. So there needs to be like some portfolio work that happens here before you'll start getting that work.
I just want to add one last little thing on here from a technical standpoint for Mark's, and then we could move on to Scott's. But you're showing in your figurature. This is a technical thing. In your figurative work, you're showing a lot of musculature and anatomy, but it's in a lot of cases it's wrong because of the way that you're rendering. And I've been in this position before where you start to lose your drawing because what you're drawing is actually really complex in all the wrinkles, the musculature, the veins, whatever, and they move around into places they shouldn't be. The lines and the muscles as you render, and those are things that are going to make you look. It's like an art director might not be able to know exactly why they don't want to hire you, but subconsciously they can tell that you're not technically proficient, as proficient as the other people that they can hire. So and it's a really hard place to be in right now, because to anyone, in a college program, or anyone that's not an illustrator, not a professional illustrator, they'll look at your portfolio and go, "Wow, I can't believe you're not getting work. This is amazing." Because on your journey from where you started to now, it is amazing. It's just not amazing enough to get work yet. And so that's where you got to go, is eventually what you really want to do is replace every piece in this portfolio with pieces that are more technically and more story driven, more better.
Let me add one more thing to that too, especially with portraiture and caricature and stuff like this, as it pertains to like magazines. Getting hired for magazines. I'm thinking like a Rolling Stone type work. I could see this kind of stuff going along with an article or something, or a band comes out with a new album or something. It needs to be current. And if I look at this through the lens of an art director, I'm thinking, man, this is some dated stuff. There's the who's the first guy with the cat? I can't remember the Mike Myers character.
Yeah, Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil.
Yeah, Austin Powers.
From Austin Powers.
Yeah, so it's Austin Powers, and then we got Rolling Stones, and these old baseball players, Dennis Rodman even in there. It's just from a different era.
Yeah,
and so
not Dennis Rodman. Dennis. Was there Dennis Rodman? The comedian?
Dennis Rodman,
yeah, there he is.
The
yeah,
basketball
you're right.
player. And Rodney Dangerfield. It's just from a different era. And so I just think with this kind of stuff, you got to keep it on the cutting edge. It has to be people who are winning.
That's a really good point.
Awards now. So just stay current.
Yeah, heck yeah. If you did caricatures of like the top 5 Emmy winners that just happened, this year.
Right.
Or the current, even like if you went to like TikTok stars or YouTube stars, because art directors are always doing like, we've got this article on, the rise of TikTok. We need, art or something. They're going to Google it, and then they're going to see, this very current stuff that you're doing. And that's going to help you. That's
and once you get in the door, if you nail it, they're going to come back to you. So, yeah.
Yeah. So going to Scott's portfolio, he's right. He's the, the jack of all trades, master of none with art. I see digital work here. I see watercolors. I see portraits. I see character designs. But none of them are like hitting hard. Like, I'm not looking at any individual one and thinking, man, that is solid, right? But as a whole, I'm like, oh, if this guy was in an art department, like I could hand him all these little odd jobs, and sort of have him like fill in gaps, but not specifically hiring him for any one specific thing, right? And I too want to say, like, his thing is he's been doing art since high school, and after 20 years have found myself questioning what kind of artist I am. I'm questioning it too. I'm looking at your stuff and I'm like, what kind of artist is he? Does he do weird portraits? Does he do character design? Like, there is no one lane that you're like solidly in. And it goes back to what Lee was saying first. It's like, do you want art to actually be a career, or do you want it to be hobby, like something you do for like fulfillment? And I think the main thing that separates the professionals from the hobbyists is the professionals aim to help somebody solve a problem that isn't their self. And the hobbyists, their art is solving their own problems. Like, I'm bored, I need to entertain, so I'm going to draw, and drawing's going to like fulfill that need. I have this creative desire to create, like I have this desire to just like express myself. Drawing's going to be my thing to like fulfill that need. A professional has abilities and skills and can solve a problem for an art director or for any sort of client, and their main priority is not fulfillment of their own desires, but using their skills to solve another person's problem. So an art director is like, I need an illustration for this editorial piece. I need a book cover. I need an artist to illustrate a story that I have. That's the professional fills that role. So you got to ask yourself, are you the hobbyist or the professional? And if it's more about fulfilling your own needs, follow that path. Just dig into it. Keep scratching itches. Like, oh, watercolor's cool. Now I want to try acrylics. Now I want to try gouache. And now today I'm just going to do digital because I'm feeling like it. And you'll be happy. And that pressure is lifted from you to try to make a career out of it. But if you're really interested in, like, you get a kick out of like being on a project and helping someone solve a thing, boy, then you know, it really is being like picking a lane. I'm the guy that you hire to do this, and then leaning into that hard.
The analogy I like to use lately with students that have this question and this problem is when you're really hungry and you're trying to decide where to go, you're going on a date, say, for example, you're going to go get something to eat. Do you ever say, oh, you know where we should go? Let's just go to the restaurant where they serve food.
Right.
I mean, it's food. They serve Mexican food and Chinese food and American food too, and then Italian as well. Let's go to that restaurant. Like, nobody wants that. Typically, you're like, hey, I'm craving some Indian food tonight, or I'm craving. It's really specific most of the time. Rarely do you say,
Like,
hey,
I need
I'm really
a hamburger.
hungry.
I need a hamburger.
It's specific. And right now, this is the equivalent of, hey, let's go to the restaurant and get food. No, nothing specific there. It's just all sort of all over. It's just a hodgepodge of stuff, which is fine. Again, like Jake said, if you're just doing it for personal fulfillment, do whatever you want to do and just keep following that path. But the second you say you want to do something a little bit more serious, well, what kind of restaurant are you? What kind of person are you? Then what kind of art do you want to make? And doesn't mean you can't still do the stuff, by the way, on the side. You just don't put it up on your site.
I think it's also important for listeners to know that most illustrators that dabble in, I'm talking the highly successful illustrators that dabble in multiple markets. In other words, editorial, book covers, children's books, comics, whatever. Most often the most successful ones have developed a style and are applying that style across the board. So, and what we're seeing with your portfolio, Scott, is different styles for every assignment. And if I'm an art director rolling up on your Instagram, I am not going to hire you because, first and foremost, because none of those styles are perfected. So there's a lot of styles that it looks like, you're having fun and you're learning, but you're learning in all of those styles. And my advice is to pick one and really, really perfect that one style. And then you can move on, if you don't like that, to another one. One thing that can really help is to do a big project, is to do a project of like Inktober in one style, where you really get a lot of practice working in one style and really can perfect that. And develop a body of work that, an art director can look at and go, I could really see that person utilizing that person in this project because they've demonstrated over and over and over that they can turn out gold in that style, Yeah.
Looking at your stuff, like, if you really want, here's a direction you could go, giving the skills set that you have already, I would say, and you want to work professionally, I'd say you have what it takes to be like an illustrator for like Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, that kind of thing, where they want people who do highly rendered, character-driven type of illustrations. You're going to have to make some portfolio pieces that could show that. You're probably going to want to see if you can get this watercolor looking effect done digitally, because it's just faster to work digitally and you don't want to spend 40 hours doing something traditional that you could accomplish in 20 hours digitally, especially if you're going to want to do it professionally. So I'm seeing the portraits here. I'm seeing this leaning towards fantasy over sci-fi. I'm seeing, interesting lighting and textures and things like that. And I could see you, really nose to the grindstone for a year, cranking out 20 portfolio pieces that show how to do all the different classes in fantasy, and each of those is like a really engaging, like cool looking illustration, and then sending that to art directors who need that kind of work, and start lining up jobs for that. I could see you being that kind of artist. I could also see you with these watercolor skills leaning into making watercolors for like art fairs, right? And just like, you go to art fair, not many people want a portrait of Charlie Chaplin. Not many people are wanting like a portrait of a fairy at a diner. But you go to an art fair and you look at what kinds of watercolors are selling, and then you're gonna want to make something that kind of fits the need there. Not that you're gonna copy anybody else's work or what they're doing, but you could see, I could see people like this, I could see people that like that, and I could make something that kind of fits right in there and like serves that type of person. So again, to do this professionally, to make money at this, it's solving someone else's problem. I have a blank wall that I need to put art on, and you're going to make that art for it. But if it's for you just wanting to make art and scratch that itch, keep doing what you're doing, keep trying to master and perfect it. Change gears if you feel like, you're getting bored with something and you want to go digital, do more digital stuff. And don't feel bad about it. Just get the most out of it. All right.
Yep. Good advice.
You guys have anything to add?
No, I think we've covered it all.
We exhausted that one. All right. I think we'll wrap it up then. Just last thing, again, we have launched our Patreon, and we're taking on patrons now. We're inviting you to go check that out. There's different levels. So if you just want to be like a base level support, you get access to the Discord, and you get these episodes coming out early. And if you really want to have more engagement, there's higher levels where you're going to get the pro tips. In fact, right after we're done recording this, I'm going to share a character design that I did, and just kind of walk you through like how I illustrated this in Photoshop. So you're going to get that for the upper levels. We're going to get live Q&As. So you can ask these questions live, and we can talk to you in person. And then there's going to be exclusive episodes that people who aren't patrons are ever going to be able to hear unless they become patrons. So it's a great way to support the show. All this money, is going to go to paying Daniel, our editor, and pay the team. You're just going to help offset some of those costs for us. And so we really, really appreciate that. And if that's it, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn, where becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts have been Will Terry, Lee White, and Jake Parker. I want you to go to willterry.com to see Will Terry's illustration work. I want you to go to leewhiteillustration.com to see Lee White's illustration work. And I want you to go to jakeparkerart.com to see my illustration work. Podcast produced by Daniel Tu. That's Daniel T.U. You can find his work at daniel2.co. Special thanks to Keeper of the Curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, Chief Operations Officer, Lisa Fott, and our Shownotes Wrangler, Lily Howell. Now, go draw something. All right. Don't hit stop on the recording or anything.
Don't hit stop.
You did?
No.
Okay, good.
I say don't hit stop.
Yeah, don't hit stop. There's many different styles to ink. For this particular style, I like to have line variation. And so you can see where things get thick and where they get thin. Usually lines get thicker at these fleshier parts of the body and thinner at these bonier parts, right? And so that's just a way to kind of emphasize where things are getting stretched and where things are getting bunched up, kind of almost treating them like the lines are tendons, right? Tendons and muscles and things like that. And then there's some places where you just will add a thicker line along the bottom to kind of imply weight to that line and maybe even a little bit of shadow. So I'll make the eyes thicker around the bottom and thinner at the top.